She refused me every night for 3 weeks. Said she was tired. Said she felt emotionally distant. Said it like a diagnosis, not a choice. Then one evening at Applebee's, without looking up from her phone, she asked if I could cover her credit card this month. That was the moment everything snapped into focus. We were sitting in the same booth we always used. Same cheap wood table. Same half-melted ice in my glass. She talked about work, about listings, about how exhausting her days were. I listened the way I always had. Quiet. Present. Predictable. At home, nights had turned into silence. We'd sit on opposite ends of the couch with Disney Plus murmuring in the background like white noise for a marriage already on life support. No touch. No tension. Just distance framed as maturity. She said intimacy felt like pressure now. Like something she didn't know anyone. But money? Money was different. That part still felt shared. Expected. Automatic. When she asked about the card, her voice was casual. Not embarrassed. Not apologetic. Like she was checking the weather. She said it had been a slow month. A few deals stalled. She'd catch up next cycle. I looked at her hands. Perfect nails. New ring I didn't recognize. Phone lighting up, face down. I realized then she wasn't withholding affection because she had nothing left. She was reallocating it. Managing resources. Keeping stability at home while shopping for leverage somewhere else. I didn't argue. Didn't confront. Didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I just nodded, paid the check, and understood something important. She thought distance was power. I understood structure was. The first real crack came from a place she assumed was invisible. A Saturday morning receipt sat on the kitchen counter, folded twice like it meant nothing. Chick-fil-A. 2 meals. One receipt time-stamped an hour before she said she'd be meeting a client. I stared at it longer than I should have, not because of suspicion, but because of the math. 2 people. Midday. Too casual to hide. Too careless to explain. I didn't confront her. I drove to Walmart instead, pushed a cart through fluorescent aisles, bought things we didn't need for a house that suddenly felt temporary. Paper towels. Light bulbs. Routine. Stability. The kind of errands that make a man feel useful while everything else quietly dissolves. That afternoon she came home energized. Too energized. She talked about a potential investor, someone who really understood the market. She said his name once and never again. I noticed how she avoided details but overshared confidence. That imbalance told me more than any confession could. Later, while she showered, her phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The preview line lit up just enough. A message about covering something this month. A reassurance. A thumbs-up emoji. That's when I understood the shape of it. She wasn't cheating out of desire. She was outsourcing pressure, letting someone else absorb her financial anxiety while I remained the quiet floor beneath her feet. That night, she said she was exhausted again. Said she needed space. Said it gently, like a boundary. I nodded. Turned on Disney Plus like always. Sat beside her without reaching. Inside, something shifted. I stopped waiting for clarity. I started preparing for exit. Evidence doesn't arrive like a movie scene. It accumulates quietly, disguised as coincidence. I found it while fixing a cabinet hinge she'd complained about for weeks. I was on the floor with tools from Lowe's spread around me, pretending the house still needed repairs instead of clarity. Her tablet lit up on the kitchen island with a notification she forgot to mute. A payment confirmation. Not from her account. Not from mine. I didn't touch the screen. I didn't scroll. The name was enough. A last name I'd heard once before, tied to the investor she spoke about like a concept instead of a person. The amount wasn't dramatic. That was the point. It was maintenance money. Bills. Balance smoothing. The kind of help that comes with expectations, but no promises. Later that night, after she fell asleep facing the wall, I checked our shared statements. Small transfers. Regular timing. Utilities that were suddenly paid early. Her credit balance shrinking without explanation. Structure, not chaos. Someone was managing her pressure for her. At Walmart the next morning, I stood in line watching families argue over cereal while my phone synced data I already understood. She wasn't reckless. She was efficient. She had turned intimacy into leverage and finances into silence. Back home, she kissed my cheek out of habit and said she'd be late again. Meetings. Always meetings. I smiled and told her to drive safe. Inside, I felt calm. Clear. The kind of calm that comes when doubt is replaced by confirmation. I stopped fixing the house that day. Instead, I opened a new folder. Separate accounts. Legal templates. Quiet steps that don't announce themselves. She thought nothing had changed. That was the advantage. I wasn't gathering proof to confront her. I was gathering distance to leave clean. I didn't disappear dramatically. I just stopped being accessible. It started with logistics. I rerouted my paycheck. Opened a new account she didn't know existed. Quietly removed my name from anything that didn't legally require it yet. I did it between meetings at work, the same way I ran forecasts and risk models all day. Calm inputs. Predictable outcomes. One morning, I took the Toyota Camry instead of my usual route and didn't come home after work. I drove until the city thinned out, checked into a motel that smelled like detergent and old carpet, and slept without the television on for the first time in months. I turned off my phone notifications. Not blocked, just muted. That distinction mattered. Back at the house, I knew the pattern would break. She was used to my consistency. Groceries appearing. Bills paid. The quiet presence that made her freedom feel safe. When that rhythm stopped, the absence would register before the reason. I imagined her pacing the living room with Disney Plus still running, refreshing her banking app, waiting for the system to correct itself. Systems don't correct themselves when they've been intentionally disconnected. I didn't check her messages. Didn't need to. Silence was doing the work for me. The next day, I went to Walmart near the motel and bought a week's worth of clothes. Nothing memorable. I wasn't running. I was resetting. By the third night, I felt something unexpected. Not relief. Control. She thought I'd vanished. In reality, I'd simply stepped out of a structure that no longer served me and watched it wobble on its own. I didn't need revenge. I needed leverage that erased itself. While she was scrambling to stabilize her side of things, I focused on understanding his. Investors like him don't appear out of nowhere. They leave trails. LLC filings. Overlapping addresses. Quiet patterns that assume no one is paying attention because no one ever does. During lunch breaks, I sat alone in my car, scrolling through public records the way I used to scroll through Disney Plus at night. Calm. Detached. He wasn't hiding anything illegal. He didn't have to. What he had was exposure. Dependencies stacked on convenience. The same weakness I'd just stepped away from. I noticed which deals she mentioned at dinner before intimacy disappeared. Which closings suddenly mattered. Which client lunches kept her out late. Chick-fil-A showed up more than once in the timestamps. Quick meals between transactions. No romance. Just scheduling. I didn't contact him. That would have been loud. Instead, I forwarded a few documents anonymously to the compliance department at her firm. Nothing accusatory. Just enough context to force questions. Reviews. Delays. The kind of scrutiny that makes easy money uncomfortable. I knew what would happen next. He would pull back. Not out of guilt. Out of risk management. She would feel it before she understood it. Payments would pause. Texts would slow. The safety net would thin without explanation. That was the point. I wasn't collapsing his life. I was removing her illusion of control. Letting her see the difference between someone who buys time and someone who builds it. That night, alone in the motel, I slept deeply. For the first time, the pressure wasn't on me to hold everything together. It was on her to realize how fragile her arrangement really was. The shift showed up in public before it reached me. I heard about it from her sister first, through a mutual contact who didn't know they were delivering a message. Questions were being asked, not accusations. Just pauses where certainty used to be. Invitations that stopped coming. Group chats that went quiet. At a family get-together I didn't attend, someone mentioned how stressed she looked. Another person asked, lightly, whether everything at work was okay. No one pressed. That was worse. Concern without curiosity is distance in disguise. At home, the house felt different even from afar. I drove by once in my car and didn't stop. The lights were on earlier than usual. I imagined her inside, scrolling, waiting for updates that weren't arriving. Disney Plus playing to an empty room, the same way it used to play between us. She went to Walmart more often after that. Small purchases. Cash back at the register. Adjustments people make when they sense instability but don't yet admit it. The real moment came at Applebee's, where she met friends she hadn't seen in weeks. I wasn't there, but the story traveled. Someone joked about how quiet she'd become. Another asked if she was still doing so well. The table went still. No one defended her. No one attacked her either. They simply moved on. That's how social structures collapse. Not with confrontation, but with polite redirection. She texted me that night, asking where I was, saying people were worried. Not about us. About her. I didn't respond. For the first time, she was visible without being centered. And everyone noticed. Isolation doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in layers. She started reaching out more. Not emotionally. Practically. Questions about bills. About timelines. About whether I'd be home soon. Each message assumed the same thing. That I was still part of the structure. Just temporarily misplaced. I wasn't. I went back to the house once, early in the morning, when I knew she'd already left. I walked through rooms I tried to fix for years. The loose cabinet I never finished after Lowe's trips. The couch where Disney Plus used to run like a ceasefire. Everything looked intact. Everything felt abandoned. On the kitchen counter sat takeout bags from Chick-fil-A, receipts folded the same way they always were. Fast food eaten alone between meetings that no longer paid what they used to. Convenience without cover. I didn't take anything personal. Just documents. A few clothes. My work laptop. I left the rest exactly where it was so nothing could be blamed on chaos. That evening she texted again. Said she felt like she was losing everything at once. Work was complicated. People were distant. She didn't understand how things had shifted so fast. I read it without reacting. The message wasn't about me. It was about gravity. She'd been floating on borrowed stability and suddenly felt the ground. I drove back to the motel, stopped at Walmart on the way, and bought a lamp. Something simple. A small act of permanence in a temporary place. That's when I understood the difference between us. She was looking for someone to hold her up. I was learning how to stand without being needed at all. She finally asked to meet. Not at the house. Not at work. Somewhere neutral, like a negotiation instead of a conversation. Applebee's again. The same booth, same lighting that made everything look slightly unreal. I arrived early and sat still, hands folded, watching the door without anticipation. When she walked in, I saw the change immediately. Not sadness. Disorientation. The look of someone who had lost timing more than trust. She talked first. Carefully. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. Said the distance felt intentional. Said she needed to understand what was happening before things went too far. I let her finish. Silence does something to people who are used to managing outcomes. It forces them to hear themselves. She asked if I was seeing someone else. Asked if this was punishment. Asked if I was planning to leave. Each question assumed emotion. I offered none. I told her I was reorganizing my life. That the finances were already separated. That the joint cards were inactive. That the next steps were administrative, not personal. Her face tightened at the word administrative. She said we should talk about us. About intimacy. About timing. About how stressful her work had been. She said the distance hadn't meant what I thought it meant. I didn't correct her. Correction invites debate. I told her I wouldn't be covering her credit card. Not this month. Not any month. I said it once. Calmly. That was the moment she realized the conversation wasn't happening in her language anymore. I stood, paid my part, and left her sitting there with a future that suddenly required explanation. I didn't look back. The collapse didn't look dramatic from the outside. It looked administrative. Her credit line tightened first. Then calls went unanswered. The investor she never named stopped being responsive. Not abruptly, just slower. Delays framed as scheduling. Follow-ups that never landed. Transactions that used to smooth her months simply stopped appearing. Work followed. Not termination. Repositioning. Deals reassigned. Questions asked twice instead of once. She was still employed, but no longer insulated. That distinction matters when your confidence has been externally financed. At home, the noise became unbearable. Disney Plus kept running, episode after episode, but now it wasn't background. It was cover. Silence filled everything else. She started sleeping on the couch. Not out of distance. Out of restlessness. I moved my last things out on a weekday morning. No confrontation. No note. Just empty closets and neutral walls. The house finally matched the relationship. She texted once after that. Not about money. About fear. She said everything felt unstable. That she didn't know who she could rely on anymore. That she hadn't realized how much I handled until it was gone. I read it while parked outside a Walmart, engine running, deciding what groceries I'd need for a week that was entirely my own. I didn't respond. Her collapse wasn't loud enough to attract help, and I wasn't there to soften it. For the first time, she had to face the cost of transactions that never included loyalty. And I was already living beyond the fallout. The ending didn't arrive with closure. It arrived with paperwork. I signed the final documents on a quiet afternoon, sitting in my car outside a Walmart, engine off, windows down. No rush. No ceremony. Just names, dates, and the removal of shared liability. That's what real separation looks like when emotion is no longer in charge. She didn't fight it. By then, she was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. The kind of tired that comes from realizing the safety you traded loyalty for was never yours to keep. Friends had stopped checking in. Work had narrowed. Even the house felt like it was waiting for someone else to make the next move. She sent one last message. Not long. Not dramatic. She said she finally understood what she'd done. That she missed how steady things used to feel. That she hadn't known distance could turn permanent. I read it once, then archived it. There was nothing left to explain. I hadn't disappeared. I hadn't punished. I hadn't raised my voice or demanded accountability. I'd simply removed myself from a system that required my silence to function. That night, I ate alone, something simple, and felt no urge to fill the quiet. Stability no longer meant being needed. It meant being free from negotiation. She thought withholding intimacy gave her leverage. I learned that structure always outlasts desire. And when she asked for support, I answered with the only word that still mattered. No, real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.